Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone. It is caught. Jelani Woods, touchdown!
A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it up, got it! Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn Emmy winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard to another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway at the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios on this Tuesday. It is August 8th. My gosh, the year's flown by. Appreciate you joining us. Of course, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, powered by Andy Moore Honda. Just go to andymoorehonda.com to get more to your door and the best in new and used vehicles. And the Wow Food Group and the family of great restaurants in and around the Bloomington area. Great places like the Chop Shop, where, of course, they have incredible custom meats, in-house made products, and a brand new steakhouse that is delicious. You can pick out your own steak, as a matter of fact. Walk from one side of the butcher to the other. How's everybody doing? Hope you are having a great day as your week continues. Great lineup today. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News will join us, chronic Hoosier, and Michael Niziolek, the IU beat writer from the Herald Times. Bloomington Herald Times will join us. We'll hear from Anthony Tucker, the co-offensive coordinator from Indiana as well, Indiana football program. Lots to talk about. I do not think that there are any more teams in the Big Ten when I woke up today. I think it's still at 18. But guess what? We've all been talking about Stanford Cal, ACC interest, question mark. The Reds win, but so do the Brewers. The Cubbies lose, so they drop out of that second place tie. NASCAR this weekend in Indianapolis. Johnny Manziel on Netflix. All kinds of fun things to talk about. John Boy, it's been a while.
It has been a while, but yeah, you just went through a gauntlet right there. And
Hey,
we've done a
baby.
lot of talking on the afternoon show that I do about conference realignment, and I feel like a lot of shows have been doing that. And one thing you mentioned with some of those the Pac-4 now, we got to call them that since there's only 4 of them remaining. I don't know if you all mentioned this yesterday.
No. Well, yes, but you might as well call it the Pac-2 because there's no way that.
I don't even know if it'll be the 2 because my initial thoughts, and maybe you know something more than I would, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if all 4 of those teams that remain join with the Mountain West and merge.
I've been saying that all along, but the Pac-12 is so stupid. San Diego State was begging to get in but George Klavikoff didn't want to. He wanted to make sure he had that nice, beautiful TV deal that he had lined up first, I guess. So, and anyway, that deal screwed up. So now you're down to Stanford, Cal, Washington State, Oregon State, like you said. If I were the Mountain West, I would jump at the opportunity to join the Pac-12 because I don't know that they do anymore, but they did have an automatic berth into the college football playoffs beginning next year when the playoff expands. And I believe that would stay in place if they were to do that. And that would be the easiest way to get into the college football playoffs. That would be the easiest path that there is. Not through the Big Ten, not through the SEC, not through the Big 12, but through the whatever it's going to be, the Pacific Mountain West Conference.
It would essentially be the American Athletic Conference of the western part of the country. You would have a lot of really good brands like Boise State and I guess you can say the remaining Pac-12 teams that are still around, but you don't have anybody who is, going to take take the reins themselves and be leading the charge for going to the college football playoff. So I think it'd be if those 4 teams or even those Mountain West teams, any of those that are thinking about joining the Pac-12, it would be interesting to see if the college football playoff committee and or the NCAA considers them a power conference still. Because I think we're going to be in a world of only having 4 power conferences, and where you'll have the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC, and then the Mountain West and the American Athletic Conference will essentially be the 2 biggest group of 5 conferences.
But there's only going to be
call them a group of 5 anymore.
There's only going to be 3 main conferences now: the Big 10, the SEC, and the Big 12. The ACC sucks in football.
Well, even though they're not good, but they still have good brands, especially in basketball. They have good basketball.
I know, but everything is football driven. This is all about the football money, and why that there's this much more football money. It's hard for me to fathom that the TV ratings are that much more because there's so many more basketball games. I don't. It takes a smarter person than me, but I'm not sure why it's so. There's such a chasm between these sports, but there is, but the ACC desperately needs an infusion on the football side because they suck as far as football. They've got one team of note: Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Duke, Virginia, North Carolina.
They have one dominant program, and the rest are just a bunch of mediocres.
Yes,
what you're saying.
Yes, Louisville.
They've
got one dominant team. Just see, that's the thing. One where you go to the Big 12, buddy. That's going to be fun. And hell, that was fun watching last year. If you remember, I had so much fun watching the Big 12 last year, and it'll be just as fun this year. Of course, we know about the Big 10. We know about the ACC. The SEC. And then out west, what are they going to do? Out west, whatever that conference ends up being, Pac-12, Mountain combined, whatever, still won't equal up to any of the other 3, but it's going to be a wild ride. Look forward to talking to Mike about it. And does this hurt teams like Indiana? I mentioned that yesterday. As far as football goes,
I think it's hard to say. Obviously, you love the money aspect of it. You love the fact that they're just going to the revenue. The more good brands you have, the more you can get with your TV deals and stuff like that. But the one way that it affects Indiana negatively, potentially, is you have to play more difficult teams more often. Obviously, when you looked at what the Big Ten put out for 2024 and 2025 before the addition of Oregon and Washington, they avoided Ohio State and Michigan altogether for next season. Now, will they scrap the schedules altogether when they redo them for adding in Oregon and Washington? We don't know yet. It wouldn't surprise me. The Big Ten loves to completely swipe the floor and redo everything.
This should help Indiana.
That's what they're going to do.
No matter what, I think that this helps Indiana. No matter what, scrapping the divisions helped Indiana.
Yes.
That number one. Now you're adding in a few other teams that are good programs, but you're not going to have to play them all. And now you have maybe less chance of having to play Ohio State and Michigan. You're going to play somebody, don't worry. But I think that this could give Indiana the opportunity to become a competitor, at least. I don't expect them to rise up and to compete with Michigan and Ohio State. No one expects that of many programs, but you have got to be competitive. And by that, I mean the ability to win 6 games a year at a minimum. And I think that this will give them an opportunity to do that because you're still going to have your 3 non-con games, and they have got to stop scheduling tough teams in non-con. Stop. Indiana does not have that luxury. Stop scheduling Cincinnati. Stop scheduling Louisville until you get to a better point. Yes.
I will say, though, to be fair, when they scheduled both of those teams, neither one of them, specifically Cincinnati, were doing very well.
But Louisville has always been.
They have a good tradition. I mean, it's obviously nothing
over the last 25 years. I mean, since Schnellenberger left and got it going, and John L. Smith and Petrino twice. I mean, they were a missed field goal from playing for a national championship in 2006 or 8, whenever that was, against Rutgers.
Yep. And yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a chance that it can benefit Indiana. I really don't know what that looks like yet. It's really hard sometimes to think of how anything football related can benefit Indiana. But really just time will tell. And we're just a few weeks away from kickoff against Ohio State, and we'll see where this year's current team stands, and we'll be off to the races with 2023, 2024.
Johnny Manziel, there is the rise and fall of Johnny Manziel and redemption. Untold Johnny Football premieres today, whenever, on Netflix. So I'm looking forward to watching that. He was something in college, man. He was fun to watch. He beat Alabama's ass twice, I think. Nick Saban was glad to see him go.
Johnny Football was one of the most interesting characters in college football for someone at my age growing up, really getting acclimated with the college football game, and to see somebody kind of take the world by storm the way that he did, and then really go the exact opposite direction once he entered the professional leagues. It's interesting, the rise and fall of Johnny Manziel.
Absolutely. So looking forward to talking to everybody today about all the different things that are going on, and everybody hitting us up on the Andy Moore Honda hotline as well. You guys are burning it up. Appreciate you. Thanks a lot, Fred, Rudy, Heath, John, Southern Brown County. That's funny. Kent is up in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, but graduated from Richmond High School, learned yesterday, over on the Indiana-Ohio border. 5 lefts. Gritty, Robert. You should never take a break, brother. You missed all kinds of things. But welcome back. We appreciate you. John. Let's see. And Russell. Appreciate everybody. We've got lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. And we'll keep chopping it up. Back right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the market, I need you to make some kind of just a quick lead in, is like chop it up.
What do you mean?
Like, it's time now to chop it up.
I don't really get it.
It's just a segment sponsored by the Chop Shop. Get it? Chop it up.
Oh, okay. Do you want it to be with anyone specific?
No, because you make it generic so you can use it all the time.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
So do you want me to get rid of the other segment sponsors? I'm confused.
No, that's just for that one. Just for chops, a chop shop. Time to chop it up for a segment.
Sure.
Especially theirs. And theirs doesn't have to be the first one. Actually, maybe start making Andy Moore the first one and move them down. So when we're actually talking to somebody when they come on, so we can chop it up.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with you there. Maybe we should. Here's the one thing I've always disliked about having Andy Moore on the segment thing is the way it looks on the background, because we have the main Andy Moore and then the small Andy Moore.
Yeah, that's
it is
okay.
what it is. It is.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Hey, it's just double advertising, man. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's like this one, like the WoW will probably get changed.
And speaking of Chop Shop, you do need to record a Chop Shop commercial.
Oh, that's right. Don't run the BBs anymore.
I won't. And if you want, if you're going to record a bunch of different things, you may want to update Andy Moore as well. I think all the other ones are fine.
No, don't we need a Bubba's and Evansville commercial? Or
you did? We do have one, but if you need to change it, you may. I mean, I don't know if you need to, but we do have one
for Evansville.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's fine. That one runs just in Evansville, right?
Correct.
I'm trying. God, okay. Anyone know anything about ad sales? Please reach out. We've got plenty of opportunities. Got to get that taken care of, man. That's
all right. I'm sure Mike will be on shortly, but here we go.
Company is the culmination of a passion for beer, food, and custom metal art. Check out their custom growlers. Metalworks Brewing Company has an updated menu, new brews, and will be offered in all Endeavor Hospitality restaurants. Come taste what Dr. Hops is brewing. Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Tuesday, August 8th. Jim Coyle with you as always. Thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate you immensely. Hope you're having a great start to your week. Mike DeCourcy will be joining shortly. Indiana head coach Mike Woodson visiting five-star guard and priority target Boogie Fland at his Archbishop Stepanek High School in September. He'll also be speaking at the New York Basketball Coaches Clinic on September 13th. Fland is a top 10 ranked player in his class and took an official visit to Indiana in June. He has his final 8 schools cut down to Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Michigan, North Carolina, St. John's, and UConn. He's a good one. Kentucky coach John Calipari and Alabama coach Nate Oates are also scheduled to speak at the same event, so all 3 coaches will have an opportunity to speak with Fland. I'm sure you may have saw yesterday, too, that former Indiana Hoosier Miller Kopp signed a professional contract with the French Basketball League Club Limoges, CSP, which is part of the Ligue Nationale de Basketball Pro A, one of the top leagues in France. In 2 seasons at Indiana, Kopp started all 70 games he appeared in and averaged 7 points and 2 rebounds a game. In his Hoosier career, he shot 40% behind the three-point line. And then in his college career, is the Big Ten's all-time leader in games played, which will never be broken, 157. Kopp started his career at Northwestern, where he played from 2018 to 2021. His organization has won 11 French League titles and 6 French Cups, in addition to 1 EuroLeague title. So there's that. Mackenzie Mbako was placed at number 25 on the Athletics Sam Vecini's first mock draft for the 24 class, if that gives you any indication. Mbako was a top 10 recruit in the 2023 recruiting class and has the exact kind of size teams from the big wings from the big wings in today's NBA. At 6'8" with long arms, Vicini wrote of Mbako, offensively, he's capable of slashing in a straight line, off closeouts, and attacking in transition. But scouts are most excited about his jumper, which looks clean and projectable long term. With those skills mixed with a chiseled frame, it's easy to see why scouts like what they saw of Mbako at Hoop Summit and in McDonald's All-American practices. He's a little worried that Mbako's athleticism profiles him more as a 4 right now than a wing.
he needs to keep working his way into most optimal shape to get the most out of his mobility. If he can do that, he'll be a one and done first rounder with lottery upside. Still, right now, there are some worries that with a lack of quickness and lateral mobility, might make it hard for him to switch on defense. And Baco previously signed to play at Duke, of course, but he reopened his recruitment in the spring, committed to sign with Indiana over Kansas. And, of course, he'll likely start for Indiana this season at the small forward spot. So a lot of high praise there for Mackenzie Mbako, one of Indiana's top recruits that came in. Awesome. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at the screen. I was reading. Michael, how are you, sir?
You're muted, Mike, on your end.
You're still muted, my friend. There we go.
I would have thought that just, my aura coming into the room, you would have known, I mean,
I had the screen blocked out. I did not even see it at all. And dummies like me, I have to make sure that I don't miss a word. So how are you, sir?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm fine. First of all, K-Bro says great column on the U.S. women's national team. Of course, I'm sure there might be a few more on those, but not as many more as people would have thought as they make that exit. But a lot of weirdness around this team, too.
Well, yeah, it starts with the injuries that they had. They lost two of their three best offensive players coming into the tournament, and then they played on Sunday without another of their best offensive players, Rose Lavelle, who was suspended on yellow card accumulation. One of the people who follow me on Twitter know that I contend and will never relent from my belief that the dumbest rule in sports is that in the NBA and now relevant to this month, FIBA basketball, you can call a timeout and move the ball 45 feet just because you called timeout. That's the dumbest rule in sports. But the idea that you can get two yellow cards in different games in a tournament that only lasts at most 7 games and get suspended for one because you do that is just an awful rule. FIFA has to do better than that. It just doesn't take that much to get a yellow card. It has to be more than that. So that's a tangent, but I just felt like that was worth getting out there. That's a bad rule. So they play that game without Rose Lavelle, and that certainly hurt them in their creativity in being able to try to penetrate the Swedish defense. But they weren't well coached from the very beginning, to be honest. When you think about a couple of different things, first of all, all of last year they played without Julie Ertz. She had been the team's established holding midfielder, and she was the most dynamic holding midfielder in all of women's soccer. And because she played, everybody in front of her knew that she was covering sideline to sideline because she was so dynamic and able to cover so much ground. And she was very aggressive in getting the ball forward and playing it forward to players like Lavelle and Lindsey Horan. So they didn't have to constantly come back to try to help defensively and try to move the ball forward. It was always coming forward. I mean, that's not without exception. And obviously everybody has to track back now and then, but on balance, they were able to be more incisive in attack because they knew they had Julie Ertz behind them. So Julie Ertz has her baby Madden in August. Everything's going great with her and her husband. Her husband says to her, I think you should try to make the World Cup. Try to go out like that. If you're gonna stop playing, try to make this World Cup and see if you can win a third. You'd be one of the few players. I mean, Pele's the only player now who's ever won 3 World Cups. With the U.S. women going out and Rapinoe and Morgan and Ertz all retiring, he may stand forever as that. And so she instead of bringing her back and putting her back in her regular position, he comes and he looks at the fact that he loses Becky Sauerbrunn on the eve of the Olympics and decides it's more important to be experienced in defense than to be experienced in the center of the field where it can help you both defensively and offensively. It was a very conservative, very unimaginative approach, and they paid for it. They scored 1 goal in 300 minutes of soccer over the second, third, and fourth games of this tournament. And that's largely due to that decision. I mean, it's not all, like I said, the injuries played a part and all of that. But what you could control was that. And he chose, I'm going to just stay back and make sure that we have everything covered in the defense, and maybe we'll score. Well, they covered everything in the defense. They didn't allow many goals either, but they didn't score any. This is the United States women's national team. They've got 4 World Cups and 4 Olympic golds, and they're worried about giving up goals that much. No, that was not an aggressive choice, and it was not the right choice for this team. Secondarily, his usage of Megan Rapinoe. I wrote before the tournament that the best outcome for the United States women's national team would be as if she never stepped on the field. Not that she didn't belong on the roster. Having her in the camp, great leadership. The women that play for that team look up to her, idolize her to an extent, the younger players, because she's meant so much to the team and the program, and she's been such a great player. But when she was winning the golden ball at the 2019 World Cup, she really wasn't fast enough. Even 4 years ago, she wasn't fast enough. She covered for that with unbelievable skill, with Crystal Dunn at the peak of her career on the same side of the field, being able to cover for her to an extent. But now she just doesn't have any speed at all. And she only should have entered the game, any game, in ceremonial kind of circumstance. If the U.S. were blowing somebody out, okay, get her in there and say she played in, 4 World Cups. Cool. I like it. Or we're down. The United States is down and needs a free kick, and she's the best there is at delivering those, or has been. And what else you going to try? Okay. The United States never encountered that circumstance. They were never in that situation. Or thirdly, if, as they did with Kelly O'Hara and Christy Mewis on Sunday, you get into a penalty shootout situation, you sub her in with a minute or two left in left in extra time so she can take a penalty. Obviously, she didn't make her penalty on Sunday, but she's one of the great penalty takers in women's soccer history. You want her in that shootout. So those are the reasons she should have played. Instead, he played her extended periods in the Netherlands game, extended periods on Sunday in the Sweden game. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe if she doesn't play, what'd she play? 60 minutes on Sunday, ballpark, 60 minutes. Maybe if she doesn't play 60 minutes, she's fresher and does a better job on the penalty shootout when she got there. But those were issues that were obvious with his coaching. And that level of conservatism really permeated his entire time as U.S. Women's national team coach. Finished 3rd at the Olympics, now finishes basically 13th in the World Cup. That's not what this program is capable of doing.
Hopefully things will certainly get better. Back on the other side of football, on the college ranks, today when I woke up, I wondered, first thing, checked, are there any more teams in the Big Ten? They're still at 18 to my last count, Michael. But the fun, people talk about UCLA and USC to the Big Ten. How about Stanford and Cal to the ACC? That is the most ridiculous. That would be just, I don't even know what word to use.
Yeah, I was listening to the afternoon drive show on the Sirius XM College yesterday, and one of the two hosts, I don't know which one, but this is good. They figure if you do that, you don't have to change the acronym for the ACC. You just call it the All Coast Conference. You got them all. You got all the coasts. That I like that. But I don't think that will happen because it doesn't make economic sense for the ACC. Stanford and Cal don't bring enough eyeballs to make it worth ESPN's while to throw another 30-some million at them. They just don't. That's why they're in the position that they're in.
What can the ACC? Is there anything these ACC teams can even do? Florida State's making all this noise, which that's another funny joke. They need a bigger piece of the pie. Why? What have you done lately? But anyway, what is there anything they can do, or that they seem locked into that media rights deal?
Well, that they are, but that's all. That's to an extent. That's also their strength. Because the media rights deal that they're locked into, you look at the Big Ten and the ACC, or excuse me, the SEC, you're nowhere near them, right? I mean, they're not. But here's the thing. You're the ACC. You're not getting there. You don't have that. You don't have that appeal. Florida State can sit there and rattle it and say, oh, we do, but they don't. If they did, the SEC would have wanted them a long time ago. The SEC never knocked on their door. The SEC never knocked on Clemson's door. They're both historically two very good football programs. They've had periods of dominance or excellence or whatever you want to call it. But they're historically very good football programs. But it doesn't change the SEC to have them inside. It doesn't make the SEC richer. Again, if there was a reason to pay $60, $70 million for either of them, the SEC would have probably said before the ACC set that grant of rights, hey, Florida State, don't do that. Because, in a year or two, we might add you and give you twice that. What bothers me most about Florida State doing this is that they signed onto that grant of rights willingly. It wasn't, there was no reason why they had to, other than they wanted to be in that league and they wanted to be on ESPN with the ACC network and all of that, and they did it. And now they're regretting it because others got richer. That's the worst reason. It's the absolute worst reason to be complaining. And the thing that really bothers me about Florida State, Jim, is they know they can't do anything about this. They're just shouting into the wind.
Posturing, baby.
I understood what they did in the spring. Try to get a better deal for yourself. What you don't have anything to lose because they're not going to fire you. If you walk into your boss's office and say, I want a raise, there's always that little chance that they could say, hey, you know what, that revolving door out there, take it. But in this case, they're not going to fire Florida State because they don't want to lose them. They like having them in the league, but they're tired. I'm sure they're all tired of hearing this. In the spring, it said, okay, you get a better deal if you perform. Now, that could be Pitt. Pitt won the league 2 years ago. That could be Pitt, or it could be Wake, which has played at a really high level, or it could be Carolina, which has a tremendous quarterback and might be able to ride that this year to great success. Who knows? Or it could be Florida State. Maybe they finally get back to where they were with Jameis Winston a decade ago or so, or when they had Bobby Bowden. Maybe they do, and maybe they don't. But if they do, they get paid. Okay, good for that. But there's no getting out of this deal like they're threatening. And what they have to remember is if they undertake the legal expense of trying to get out of this deal, and they're successful, which they won't be, but if they were, it would still cost them a ton of money just to pull this off. And then they have to find somewhere to go. There's no reason to believe that the SEC would be interested, especially if I'm the Florida Gators. I'm like, nope, not happening.
They definitely don't want them in.
I'm sure K-Bro knows that. They don't want them in there. Why would they want them in there? You're giving up the advantage you have over the other major programs in your state. For what? They're not going to make you more money. There's not even really a scenario in which where Florida State would be a program that ESPN would say, okay, we'll cover them. We'll give them a full share. There's not even that scenario. So why would you let them in if they're not going to make you more money?
None. I mean, they're not. There's no draw to me. They're. It's not like a Stanford who has all of their athletic programs are excellent.
They are.
and their academics are excellent. So I don't see any reason for the SEC to look at Florida State. It doesn't bring them any television. It doesn't bring them anything. They're not doing anything of greatness. So it does not add anything to the SEC. It angers one of your longtime members, yes. Florida. So there's no. It's a negative more than a positive for them. They've got no place to go.
They're unhappy because they're not making as much as Florida. That's just not a good enough reason. Hey, you know what? Florida was in the right league at the right time, and that's how things work sometimes. But you make the best of what you do. How about going out and winning some freaking football games? How about that? Yeah. Like when was the last time you were really special? Like I mentioned, Winston I don't think they've had an extraordinary season since his Heisman season. So, why don't you get better instead of complaining to everybody else about your lot in life? I have less time for Florida State than I have for anybody in all of this. Yeah. I have no patience for that at all.
We've got to take a quick break. We've got Mike DeCourcy with us from the Sporting News and the Big Ten Network. We'll be back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Funny thing is, Kalen DeBoer back in the Big Ten. Kalen was Indiana's offensive coordinator when they were really good a few years ago, Kalen DeBoer was the guy. He's the head coach at Washington now, and he's got Michael Penix.
Right.
1 year away, boy. That could
But Michael won't make it, right? I mean, this got to be it.
He'll be gone. It'll miss by 1 year. But how crazy would that have been?
It would have been pretty wild. But I'm like, there can't be that many COVID years of eligibility out there. Michael played a few here.
I can't. Here's a discussion. Is this good, bad, or their other for programs like Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, Purdue, yada, yada, yada? I don't know that it's going to hurt Indiana because, first of all, they don't have to play Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, and Michigan guaranteed every stinking year. Not that they're not going to have to play some teams because you got plenty of opportunities to play good teams, but when you know you got to walk in and get hit on the head with a sledgehammer, it's like it's just hard to walk into there time and time again. So if like next year their schedule had loosened up and would have given them some breathing room, and if it stays that way, it would give them the opportunity, or teams like that, the opportunity to get and be competitive. I don't expect Indiana to be Ohio State, but they've got to you have to win or be able to win 6 games a year, period.
Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about, and we can have this conversation on the air, is that a lot of college sports fans are going to have to reset expectations. I think that goes up and all the way to the top of the standings, all the way to the bottom of the standings. I think you have to reset how you think about your program. With the size of the leagues, somebody's going to finish 18th now. I mean, it was like getting pretty deep when you had somebody who had to finish 16th. Now it's 18th. That's a long way down. And then you have the fact that teams are going to slip now because an injury here or there, and there's just nowhere to turn with all the competition that you're bringing in with 2 more programs that have historically been. Think about it. You're bringing in 2 programs that have historically been powerful, at times extraordinary, on a top of SC, which has been, one of the great programs of my lifetime, and that's that goes back a ways, and then UCLA, which has always been sort of a 300 hitter, right, in baseball. They've always been around, and they very rarely come up with the Mendoza line. They've never been great. They've always been very good to very good. And so that puts a lot of challenge. And so if you have the wrong injury or the wrong transfer or whatever, teams that are used to being good are going to have like a 3-6 season, or excuse me, a 3-8 season, or a 4-7 season, 4-8 season, 3-9 season, I should say. You're going to have some of those, and I think that college fans are going to have to reset expectations.
Proud partner of WOW Network. This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indy Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back on this Tuesday, August 8th. Jim Coyle with you at Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by our good friends from Remax Realty and Cheryl Sizemore. If you're in Indianapolis area needing a home, you need Cheryl and her 2 decades of experience. It could be the difference between getting the home you want or not. Reach out to her, Cheryl, at IndyHomePros.com. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News. We've been talking about all things, lots of different things, but of course, conference realignment. Realignment is not even a word that's worthy of using anymore. Realignment. It's not realignment. This has been smash and rebuild. More like that. But when it's all said and done, Rick Pitino had a good comment. He said, just separate football. It doesn't have to be the same for basketball, and do it regionally. Something similar to Chip Kelly said, do it like the NFL model. Said there just needs to be one conference, which in football, which I don't know how that works, because that's not really a conference. That's just football. There's no such thing as just one conference, but it's the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big 12 are going to be the big three. I mean, there's just with the programs.
Are we putting the Big 12 in that company? Really?
I'm not saying they're as good as the Big Ten or the SEC, but they're closer than they are farther away than they are the ACC and the.
I don't know that I would agree with that. I don't think I would. I think the Big 12 and the ACC are basically in the same category. And then whether the Pac-12 can stitch itself together I'm not encouraged based on the things that I've read from people who really know the league. I read the terrific John Wilner, who does such a great job of covering the Pac-12 and who was trying to tell their presidents for the last decade, the presidents in the Pac-12, look, you guys, this ship is going off the edge of the earth if you don't turn it around. He kept reporting on things that showed the Pac-12 was going in the wrong direction, and they never listened. And now it went off the edge of the earth. He was right. But now he's talking about Stanford and Cal and Oregon State, Washington State looking for new membership. And he's talking about some of the schools that they're talking about, according to his reporting, are Rice and Tulane. I'm like that ship's going to the edge of the earth again. It's like when you start dialing the phone to pick up Tulane, that's when you know your league is done. I remember I was in Bloomington for some event in 2012, I think it was. I
think of Tulane, I think of the Metro Conference.
That was when it worked. But when they started playing football with when Conference USA, excuse me, not Conference USA, when the Big East, I remember I was in Bloomington. I was in a hotel room in Bloomington, the Fairfield Inn, because I can't remember what event I was doing down there, some kind of practice or a story or something. And Big East had a teleconference to announce they were inviting Tulane. And I knew at that moment that was the end of the Big East. I knew that all the Catholic schools were going to say, that's it, we're out. So if you're Tulane is a great university, and they've had some very fine athletes and very fine athletic programs. And the next time you and I go to one of their games, Jim, we will double the crowd. That's the way it works at Tulane. Okay. There's just not anybody that's interested. And so if you're the Pac-12 and you're calling Tulane, then you know that the future project doesn't have any greater leadership or direction than the former project. If you want to grow, if you want to rebuild the Pac-12, you start with San Diego State. You then go to Vegas. Then you go to Memphis. Then you think about, okay, all right, now we need some Do we want to go to SMU because it's a big market? Well, we need a little bit of numerical weight, so that's maybe not a bad choice. But those are the places that you go because they have followings. They have potential, growth potential. Like every single league in professional sports wants to be in Vegas. The Pac-12 has held their tournament, their basketball tournament in Vegas for more than a decade. Why don't you want UNLV? Like it's not always been a great athletic program, but they've had moments where they've been spectacular, and it's a market that's growing, and it's a market that's the college team. I mean, it's a city team. SMU is not Dallas's team. University of Texas is, or Texas A&M. That's the market. SMU is not Dallas's team. They just happen to be located in Dallas.
Absolutely, and as we move forward, so. The playoffs change. Everything is changing. Now we're going to have a 12-team playoff. How are they going to? The Pac-12 had an automatic berth. What does the Mountain West and the Pac-12? I don't know the merger. There's nothing left of the Pac-12 other than Washington State and
Oregon State, and the Stanford.
I guess Stanford and Cal, you count them but they're not. I don't think that they're going to go into a Mountain West Pac-12 merger. I think that they're too big for that. Other than it would give them an easy path to the college football playoffs if those teams merge and form a conference again, because that's an easy path. And we heard that Oregon was possibly content with staying in the Pac-12 because of that reason.
Yeah, I think if they'd been able to get the money to where the Big 12 was, and again, this is another of the Pac-12's failures, to be unable to get the money to that level. I think they all wanted to stay because in the end, Oregon and Washington are going to the Big 10, with the possibility of ending up getting more money, but that's in 7 years, 8 years. The contract runs. The new contract's going to run 7, so they're not getting full shares. As to my understanding, they're not supposed to get full shares until the next deal. So they would have been able to stay in that league and compete for that tournament bid. And I think that honestly has value. I think that there were too many that were too quick to run away from it. There was value in it. But I also think that they were skittish about being strictly streaming. I think that was a little early for them. If it had been a streaming cable combination, I think that they would have been I think they might have been more inclined to stick with the league if a streaming cable combination had put them in the dollar figure they eventually wound up at. They might have been more interested.
So what's next now? As we come into the season, we're going to get to just move forward. But I think I asked this off air, and so I can't remember. We've talked about so much. Does this growth in the Big Ten, teams like Indiana, Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers, does this give them a little breathing room with the dissolution of the divisions and the ability to not have to be forced to play Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State every year? Is that going to allow some of these teams a little breathing room to maybe grow? Indiana has just this schedule has just destroyed them.
Yes.
But they also they're their own worst enemy. They have not made the commitment to football. They need to make a commitment to football as well. But this is an opportunity, I think, where they can get to be competitive.
Well, think about how difficult that was being in that division. There are how many schools have football programs big enough that they need 100,000 seats to accommodate their fan base? I mean, there are probably fewer than 10 in the country in Division I that have that, and three of them are in
Big Ten. In the division, in the same division.
That's what I'm saying. You had Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, all 100 plus. I mean, once upon a time, it was just the big house and that was it. But as the popularity of Buckeye football grew and the popularity of Penn State football grew, they got to the point where they could accommodate it. And so you're going up against that. That's a lot of might to go up against. And okay, it gives you the opportunity to pull an upset every now and then, but it beats you down. It wears you down to have to play that kind of might. What you play 9? That's a third of your league schedule. You play 9 league games, and a third of them are against those 3 teams. That's a lot. So the redivision of the schedule will be a benefit to Indiana. There's no doubt about that. Now, how much they take advantage of that is up to them, but it's a huge benefit. But the league does get stronger and deeper with the addition of Oregon and Washington. They did not bring on Arizona State and Arizona, 2 programs that have never been elite in football. I think Arizona State's maybe had a moment or two of sunshine, but not much. And you would have brought them on, and that would have been 2 markets and 2, and another great basketball program and one very good one. But it wouldn't have been as deepening to the league in football. Now, of course, that's why they did it. That's why they took Oregon and Washington, because they have great fan bases. They have big stadiums. They have big markets that are interested. Oregon is not in Portland, but Oregon is one of, if not the team for Portland, which is a reasonable size market. And of course, UW is in Seattle. The one thing I'll say they're doing, Jim, by doing these deals is for those who want to travel to watch their teams play. I mean, there are not very many cooler places to watch a basketball game than Heck Ed. I don't know what. Then I think it's Alaska Airlines Arena now, but it's Heck Ed Pavilion is like one of the coolest buildings.
Where's this?
10. That's Washington's gym.
Oh, okay.
And I covered a game there when I covered the Bearcats, Cincinnati. They played a road game there, and then I went out several times when Washington was very good in the middle part of the 2000s for Sporting News. I went out to see games there, and it's just a cool. It's like the Barn, like Allen Fieldhouse, like Cameron. It's one of those. So another cool thing. And then for football, they have a beautiful stadium right there on the water. It's really nice. So
very known. The sound, baby. The sound.
Yes. Seattle's a great city to visit. It's one of the really beautiful cities in America. So the Big Ten keeps giving you that.
What does Washington and Washington and Oregon bring to the Big Ten other than those TV markets? And they're good programs, but they didn't need them.
At the end of the day, I think you get them at a bargain price, I think is what really was the impetus. If you think about it, when you have let's say Michigan State plays Nebraska, say, okay, that costs the TV networks $1. That's what you're paying. Not $1, but that's everybody 100%. Each of those schools is getting 100%. Now, when you have UCLA play Washington, say, that's a Big Ten football game that is part of your package, wherever it lands, whether it's a CBS game or a NBC game or a Fox game. That game you're getting for 75 cents on the dollar is what is the reality. It's a bargain. Oregon versus USC is a great college football game, and for the foreseeable future, you're getting it 75 cents on the dollar, and so that's the appeal. And yes, Philip, I was trying not to say anything too negative, but that Oregon basketball court is
abysmal.
It's bad. Maybe the Big Ten can say, hey, if you want us to show games from your gym, you got to get a court that doesn't look like that. Maybe they
looks like a basketball court, boys.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes, maybe they can do that. I would be all for that.
I don't know if you have a few more minutes. I just 5 or 10 minutes, but because I want to talk about does the Big Ten go to 18 or 20, and a few other things. But we've got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Back with a little bit more Mike DeCourcy right after this.
We'll be right back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the market, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Do they stay at 18 or do they go to 20? Do you just go to the full 20?
What difference does it make? Why would you, I mean, if
are they going with 18 in football? Is it just going to be the top two teams that end up? How are they going to determine the Big Ten champion? There's going to have to be.
Well, that was the original plan. It was with 16. It was going to be the top two teams. So why wouldn't it be that way with 18?
Well, but how are they not going to be ties? A lot of ties.
Well, they have to have tiebreakers, obviously, but they have to, maybe head to head. Maybe it's who's the highest team in the league you beat.
And I guess this wouldn't work for football as much, but for like basketball, if they had 20, you could have 4 pods of 5 teams each. That would help travel. I don't know. When you have that many teams, you got to do something.
Well, I just don't see how making it bigger. I mean, again, there's nobody out there other than
how are they going to schedule it? Are you going to play?
Here's why you don't go to 20, Jim. Here's why you don't go to 20, because you want to keep the door open for Notre Dame. I mean, that's the real.
I'm about ready. I'm about this close to saying, you know what? You've had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and you're going to end up in a stinking ACC. And good luck to you. You're going to get left behind.
Jim, here's the thing. If you say that, so what you're essentially saying is, I'm so mad at you, Notre Dame, that I'm going to take Cal. Like, really? Like, you're that mad? I mean, what? I'm not that mad. If I'm the Big Ten, I'm not that mad. I mean, I'm not.
But does Purdue and Indiana want that?
Well, but Notre Dame doesn't. It's right there, but it doesn't really impact you. It doesn't because, like, they're not. Although they are located in Indiana, they are not an Indiana school per se. I mean, their following is Are there people that live in Indy that are Notre Damers? Absolutely. One of my closest friend's daughter goes to Notre Dame, and he was a Notre Dame fan before that.
Yeah, but they're everywhere.
But they're everywhere. So it doesn't really impact you. And here's the thing. If you got Notre Dame, you know how you're getting Washington and Oregon for a bargain. Or maybe you could add somebody like a Carolina who could be worth enough. And eventually, of course, we're talking about 15 years down the road. But who could maybe be worth enough to cover their own participation. And they could bring you into a new market and all that kind of stuff. But Notre Dame might be able to push the power higher.
Here we go,
Stop
guys.
by Feast Market and Cellar today.
This segment is brought to you by Feast Market and Cellar. Now back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. It is Tuesday, August 8th. Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by Feast Market and Cellar, part of the Wow Food Group, located right next door to Southern Stone at Patterson and Rogers. Make sure you stop in and have yourself one of the great bottles of wine and a great meal. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News Big Ten Network with me. We have been talking all kinds of things, and now I want to ask about the Big Ten. They're at 18. Do they stay at 18 or go to 20 and just even it out? Does that help hurt schedules? Does that help hurt the conference? They don't need 2 more teams, I understand. But do they add to? You've got Cal and Stanford out there. You have a Big Ten West. And you mentioned Notre Dame. Is Notre Dame ever going to get off of this independent thing where now the Big Ten is going to be close to probably doubling what Notre Dame makes per year?
Well, I don't know that Notre Dame has completed their television contract, but I think that what I was hearing is that they're hopeful that they don't expect to match the Big Ten payout, but I think they're hopeful to get into the neighborhood. I mean, I don't know what would be considered the neighborhood, but within 10 or 15 million.
I can't see that.
I can.
But the Big Ten is going to have to be at 125 million after UCLA, USC are fully in, and Notre Dame was.
And they're not anywhere near that. The contract is for 8-9 years, and they're not anywhere near that. And that's not a criticism. It's because the 60 or 70 that they're getting is a lot of money, but they're not getting 120.
But no. But aren't they going to have to redo this after these teams join? I mean, it's not the same.
No, my understanding is that Oregon and Washington are coming in for about a half a share, and that's going to last for a while. That's my understanding. So I don't think that they're going to the networks aren't looking to open the door to changing the deal because they added those two and giving a full share to them. That's like that was never a starter for the networks because their money's not there. Again, that's why the Pac, you don't go from not being able to get 30 million in the Pac-12 to being worth 60 or 70 in the Big Ten. You're worth more because your games are now Big Ten games, but you're not worth twice that. What you couldn't get in the Pac-12.
But let's say Notre Dame does join the Big Ten, and that again makes it even stronger. Yet now you've got Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame, UCLA, USC, all that. That would be a new media deal, and these programs would be making minimum 100 million, I would imagine.
Maybe. Well, that's what I'm saying about moving to 20. In my belief is that it would be illogical to move to 20 because there's nobody out there for the next, at least until the ACC deal is up, which is 2036, and when Carolina would be available, theoretically. There's nobody out there until then that would be worth moving for. So you leave the door open to go to 20 at some point, and Notre Dame maybe changes their mind, or maybe some new people, new thinking get in there and don't have the same devotion to independence as they do now. Jim, I've said this a million times. I don't understand Notre Dame's devotion to independence. I don't see what it gets them. It doesn't make any sense to me at all, because you can't play for a league championship. We only play for national championships. I think that's as broken an approach as back when Bo Schembechler was saying, I don't care about the national championship. I only care about the Big Ten and the Rose Bowl. That was not enough ambition. And Notre Dame now saying we only care about the national championship. I think athletes go to school to try to accomplish something. And going 11-1, we were 11-1. We played in the playoff and we lost the first game or whatever. Like what that doesn't resonate as much as we were Big Ten champions. It doesn't.
No, because the national championship is so much harder to win now.
Yeah, it is. And before you had to go through your schedule and maybe win a big bowl game, and that's how you got it. And so in 74, 75 or whatever that, back then, they won it when I was a kid. That happened. Or 66 when they tied Michigan State and they were voted and all that nonsense. But it's different now. So I think that, of course, I didn't go to Notre Dame. And so Notre Dame, I haven't really had this conversation with a lot of Notre Dame fans. I'm just looking at from the perspective of athletes that I've dealt with over 40 years of covering college athletics. And I think that there is a value to winning a conference championship that's not available to one segment of Notre Dame athletes. All the rest can play for conference championships. Hockey, men's ice hockey, they're in the Big Ten.
Everybody, isn't every program except
yes.
And football's halfway in anyway. They've got one foot in the water already.
So I don't understand them. And that's why I think that it's possible 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, somebody new is in charge and looks around and all the people who we have to stay independent are no longer around or whatever. And then maybe it happens. I don't know. But I would leave, if I'm the Big Ten, I'm not going to 20 just to get people, and I'm waiting and saying that door is always open for the Irish because they're the one program out there that's not already committed to, say, the SEC, that can come in and say, okay, we can go now and say we're worth even more money. Not we have more bodies we have to cover getting the same share, but we're worth more money because we got the Irish in our league, and every league game they play is going to be huge.
Speaking of scheduling, I do not understand. Indiana's scheduled to play Notre Dame in about 10 years, I think, which is utterly ridiculous to me. Why you would schedule something that far out?
Oh, they've been doing that forever, for as long as I've been doing this.
I know, and it's always been dumb to me. But
yes.
Now it's almost ridiculously off the table. But what was I going to say? Oh, I don't understand. They act like the scheduling is so difficult, but how many times in the last couple of years have we seen them just dismantle a schedule and pound one out like that? Boom. They just did it. They just did. The Big Ten just did it for football, and guess what? They've got to turn right around and do it again.
Yes, they do.
So my thought is, it should always be that way. You take these to schedule, and you use the previous season results, so you have a more competitive schedule. You're not having the worst team play the top 4 teams. You're not having Indiana play, Michigan, blah, blah, blah. You can move it around. It's not as hard as they make it out to be. I know there's travel and all that, but you have a year. I think you can manage your travel inside of a year.
Here's the thing, though, Jim, that you would have to consider that football mentality is a lot different than basketball mentality in terms of scheduling and accomplishment. On the NCAA tournament selection committee has been conditioned to say, okay, look at who they played. I mean, okay, that and they beat a fair share of them. That's a number 1 seed because look at who they played. In football, it's like, man, they went 10-2. That's not good enough. They have to go 12-0. And I don't know that you're going to change that mentality quickly. So I don't think that whereas once upon a time in the Big East, they used to do that. Quadrant 1 played amongst themselves. Everybody played home and home. Like if you were UConn, Syracuse, Georgetown, and Pitt had finished 1, 2, 3, 4, say, they all played each other. And then their next group of games was going to be against the next group. And they played very few games against the teams that finished at the bottom. And the bottom teams played each other a bunch, like Seton Hall and St. John's and DePaul and South Florida played each other a bunch. And it helped their league get more tournament bids because schedule strength mattered so much in basketball. But if you did that in football, and let's say, okay, so Ohio State has to play Michigan, Penn State, USC, and Oregon. Okay, that's who they got to play. I mean, they're not going 4-0 against those most years. That's a heavy weight to carry. And so is the football playoff selection committee, which doesn't run by NCAA standards. Remember, they're a separate organization, so they don't have the same. They don't have the same predispositions towards schedule strength and all that. They can just look at that and say, man, they lost 2 of those games. We're not putting them in this field, or we're putting them in and they're a 12 seed. So I don't think that would be as productive in football as it has been or could be in basketball.
Yeah, we'll certainly we'll find out. How it's going to be fun for you. You've got you get to deal with all this come basketball season. Basketball scheduling, that's going to be something. How is that? Is that going to be like it has been in the past, where there's, say, 5 teams you play home and home with? There's 5 you play on the road, 5 you play.
I don't think there's any question, and I think more than ever that will be somewhat geographic. I think, like if you're going to do it that way, and you're going to have 2 plays in your basketball season, why wouldn't you have Stanford, Oregon, Washington, and USC be UCLA's 2 plays, at least multiples of them. Like, why would you have them play Rutgers, Maryland, and Penn State for 2 plays? You wouldn't. I mean, it's going to have to be geographic. It just makes good logical sense to do it that way.
What about Notre Dame joining Stanford and Stanford and Cal in the ACC?
No. Look,
I mean, that's the only thing I see saving the ACC.
No, if no, what's saving the ACC and will for the foreseeable future is the grant of rights. Look, if it were easy to get out of one of those deals, do you think that Texas and Oklahoma would have spent last 2 years in the Big 12 and B, written a big check just to get out a year early? I mean, they wrote big checks. They were not small checks. They wrote big checks to get out a year early.
That was part of the misfortune of the Pac-12. Nothing to hold Oregon, Washington, UCLA, or USC too. They were able to bolt and leave.
Right. Well, I mean, those grant of rights usually coincide with your television contract, and the inability of the Pac-12 to get out into the market. They basically let the Big 12 beat them into the market is what they did. And their lack of foresight. I mean, I could complain about what. Okay, so USC and UCLA announced they're going last July, I believe it was. All right, so you have 2 choices at that point. You call San Diego State the next day and say you're in, or you wait until UCLA goes through the machinations they had to go through to get through their Board of Regents so that they could be approved to leave for the Big Ten. I personally would have called them the next day and said, you're in. That was well before they made the championship game of the NCAA tournament, but San Diego State, an absolutely vibrant market that keeps you in Southern California. They've had very good athletic programs, and they're like, no, we're not going to do anything until we get our TV deal done. And then they spent more than a year trying to come up with a TV deal. And look, it doesn't matter if it takes you forever to get your price. If you get your price, but you didn't get your price, you got under your dollar figure, and you had to go full streaming to do it. So they lost on both counts there. They don't call it. It's different for Major League Soccer is all in on Apple, and they can do that because their fan base is oriented towards streaming. It's a younger fan base, and the fact that they don't have to recruit college basketball players and college football players who they're like, when's the last time I saw Oregon on TV? Well, I haven't, because they're on Apple TV theoretically. And so it's harder. So they needed that presence in the over-the-air and/or cable market. And they weren't able to secure that. So they made major mistakes, multiple mistakes. But the number one, it started with not immediately inviting San Diego State to be a member. That was their first big mistake, because they needed to have numerical heft. That's why it's one of the reasons why leagues expand is, okay, if we shed a Colorado, that's okay. We already, they haven't ever won anything. San Diego State was in the national championship game last year, and we can sell that they're going to be in our league in a year or a year and a half.
Mike, what's up next for you?
I'm working on some stuff about this very subject that we've talked about for the last hour.
I can't imagine.
Hard to believe, right? And then we'll still be covering the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, as it goes toward its conclusion next weekend. Obviously takes a little bit of steam out of it to not have the U.S. women's national team in there, but it's still one of the most important sporting events in the world.
Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and the Big Ten Network. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, John.
Have a great rest of your week. We've got more coming up, including Chronic Hoosier, brought to you by Metalworks Brewing Company. You can find it at all of the WOW Food Group locations. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Whether it's
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello. What's going on, Jim?
Same old, brother. Just living the dream.
Just getting logged in here.
Just getting ready for all the craziness.
I feel like every week it just gets a little bit crazier than the one before, if we're being honest.
Hey,
Yep.
Chronic, you sound a little fuzzy. And
I'll
that
tell you
may
what,
not be the right word.
let me switch. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. You sound great.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
How have you been, brother?
Busy, man.
Well, that's a good thing. I hear you. Yeah. Oh, God, me too.
Getting back in the groove with the kids back in school here.
Oh, yeah. I stopped by one day last week.
Must have been Wednesday because I didn't see you.
It may have been. I don't remember.
I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, so no shame. Did you get a chance to talk to Boss Man?
I did. Trying to decide.
That's usually the hardest part in the whole process. Just making your pick.
Yes, sir. Babaroo. Been doing any grilling?
Little bit. We've been doing a little bit. We've been on the go so much, just haven't had a whole lot of time. We've been trying to make the most out of some patios here. When we go out.
I've just been reading about all this conference crap. Laughing about the ACC and Stanford and Cal. That's just a freaking joke.
You know,
no way. That's just
it's
no
probably
way that would work.
The best, worst lifeline for them, given the circumstances. I just don't know that it's anything more than a temporary bridge from one predicament to the next, if we're being honest.
All right, here we go, guys.
Is their main focus, Southern Stone strives to always provide their guests with an exceptional dining experience. With weekly specials, quick, attentive service, Southern Stone Restaurant provides delicious 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday, August 8th, brought to you by Andy Moore Honda. Make sure you go to andymorehonda.com to get more to your door and the best in new and used vehicles. Chronic Hoosier joins us now. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Jim. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Always great to have you. Nothing going on in the sports world. Nothing to see here, folks. Just keep moving along. Actually, just joking. It seems like it changes with a blink of an eye. And everybody can complain about it all they want, but that's like, just forget about this. You got to get past that and deal with the here and the now, because that's going to change again.
No doubt. It very much feels like a game of musical chairs right now. And you have these moments where it stops and there's a rapid reshuffling or reordering. And then it just starts right back up again. You know, we had a lull there for a little while with the Big Ten. After the formation of the alliance, the last time there were some seismic shifts in the college landscape, and that proved to be rather temporary. And if history is any guide, the current landscape is probably going to be short-lived as well, as the game, the sport of college football, at least, just continues barreling towards this maximization of revenue, and everything that we've ever known, all the traditions, the alliances, the conferences, that's all in flux. And it's everything's gone out the window right now. And I think the timing's kind of ironic when you now see this push at the national level to somehow regulate, to rein in, as everybody likes to say, NIL and the portal and all these other things. And while you've got multiple groups of politicians, senators proposing various legislation addressing those issues, all the while maintaining that these are amateurs, these are not employees to be paid or to take a revenue share. You've got the various schools making these arguments, doing just that, and just jumping ship on a few hours notice, and completely abandoning everything that's moored them to their regions, their conferences, for sometimes centuries. It's wild, and it's not going to stop. It's just not. It's one of those things where the whole goal is to maximize your profits, and every time a new media rights deal is struck, the bar just keeps getting raised, and the haves suddenly become the have-nots. And now, rather than negotiating a better deal, everybody's just jumping ship and getting on board with whatever the most recent version of the gravy train is. And I think you'll probably see that continue either until college football as we know it's dissolved and takes some other shape, or we just have the emergence of these super conferences that have been foretold for some time. But it seems certainly like we're rapidly heading down that track, wherever it may lead.
Absolutely. And closer to home, it begs the question, as the Big Ten has grown and become a bi-coastal conference, does this help or hurt, say, Purdue and Indiana in football, and the effects are in basketball? Because I think that they're actually going to help both football programs. I think it's going to, Purdue didn't need any help. They had an alleviated schedule. They were in the West, but Indiana gets an alleviated schedule now. They don't have to get punched in the face 4 times guaranteed by a top 5 school. So that should help them. Basketball is only going to help grow their brand. I think Indiana's already a semi-national brand again. It was always been a national brand, but through some downtimes, but I think that this will help get Indiana back to a national brand quickly on the basketball side. Purdue, I'm not quite sure what it will do for them.
I think short term, it's only going to help both the revenue programs as well as the rest of the department, all the non-revenue, the Olympic sports, simply because the infusion of additional cash, for all the woes of IU football fandom. This is one of those times where you step back and you have to acknowledge how remarkably fortunate Indiana is to be in the catbird seat here. When you find yourself part of the richest conference in the nation, arguably not the best football conference in the nation, but the richest, at least as far as what the contracts stipulate and the revenue shares each of the teams get. That's great for Indiana. That's great for Purdue. You would much rather be on the inside than on the outside in this scenario. The question is how long that maintains, because as you continue to add additional programs, and previously it was very easy to see the how and the why the expansion happened. I'm still not exactly sure. I'm fairly sure why USC and UCLA were added. Washington and Oregon. Big Ten's basically just picking the best of the bargain bin at that point, it seems like. But at the end of the day, you're talking about some viable football programs. Whether it be historically, whether it be more recently, teams that are likely better than Indiana and Purdue, if you will. I don't know that UCLA necessarily falls in that category, but nonetheless, you're adding some more heft to the conference. And for all the Indiana football fans that were relieved to see the divisions going away here next season, now you throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into it by adding a couple more programs. But I think at the end of the day, how much better is Indiana's position going to be after this? Let's see what those schedules look like and, how they fare against those. Because I don't care who you're playing. If you can't get above 500 for Indiana, you're no better off than you were before, quite honestly. And then that begs the question, if this continues to progress down the road, at what point do you find yourself the odd man out? As everything is consolidating into these mega conferences, if you're going to pick, say, the 30 best football teams in America to compete in some super league, it's not very likely Indiana gets a call for there, and Purdue, for that matter, year to year, maybe on the wrong side of that line too. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen, immediately soon, but it's one of those prospects that just seems more likely the more you see some of this reshuffling. Which is unfortunate, but at some point you've got to produce a product that justifies your position. I know a lot of people that take that position think that's rather fatalistic. Don't get me wrong; teams still need lesser competition in their conferences, in their divisions, in their leagues. Ohio State's got to play somebody. That's not necessarily a Michigan every week, but it does start to it starts to get, the ice gets a little thinner the further down this road you go, because at the end of the day, you're not quite at that echelon yet, and you've only sniffed that echelon, fleetingly few years over your history. So I think it would be wise for programs like Indiana and Purdue to really smartly invest in the resources these windfalls they're finding themselves in, and figure out what it takes to become, stable, sustainable, and viable in this new environment. Because with so many things being renegotiated all the time, and all the backroom deals that are being struck here, don't be surprised, don't be caught a couple years down the road if circumstances change and you're no longer in the cool kids club because you can't produce a product that deserves a seat at that table. So I think it's going to be good for now. Let's see what they do with it, though.
Yeah, and so the basketball side of things are going to be really exciting. You think of Indiana going to Los Angeles to play UCLA in Pauley Pavilion on a semi-regular basis. I guess it'll be I'm guessing that might be an every 2 years thing.
Yeah, that's probably what they're going to end up having to move to, just with the influx of additional, teams, especially when you start looking at those. One of the challenges right now is, in addition to adding more teams, you now span 4 time zones, and Tuesday night games, midweek, with the academic commitments these guys have. I'm going to be real interested to see how they navigate the scheduling component of it. And while it's a lot easier to focus on basketball, it's all the sports, but basketball in particular, just the number of games that they play over the schedule is going to make it really, really difficult. And Indiana fans remember what it's like going out to, say, Portland, Oregon on a quick turnaround, and just how that can kind of drain the tank. Just from the logistics
and the wallet
of getting there. And that's a huge part of it too, is what kind of net gain are these schools going to expect when now you're chartering everything just because it's the only practical way to get your kids there and back in a timely manner. It's going to be wild, but not the least of which, going from an Eastern time zone to a Pacific time zone and back, you don't want to be doing that too many times throughout the course of the year. So it'll be fascinating to see how they tackle that component of it and what impact that has on the product, quite honestly. And, that's the one thing that I don't think you should necessarily trust the powers that be, is to focus on that element of it, or else we probably wouldn't be in this boat to begin with. But we'll see how they manage that. But I would expect that issue in particular to come to the forefront, because you're talking about significant time and travel commitments. And anybody that spent any time on the road professionally knows that absolutely takes a toll on you, physically and mentally, for that matter.
Absolutely. And we've talked, I forget who I was talking about this yesterday, but I can see also that if you're going to the West Coast, you do it kind of like the professionals do. If you're going to go play UCLA, you're going to go play USC as well. That's going to be a 3-day trip, and just make it a 3-day trip. And that way you're saving some economics that way. The same with Portland and Washington. You do the same thing there. Boom, boom. You're up in the country. You just get around. And then for Olympic sports, I think they're just going to have a lot of larger events, multi-team events, which would alleviate cost as well.
Yeah, that's going to be a very, very precarious situation, because the budgets for field hockey, for example, just a drop in the bucket compared to what the basketball programs are looking at. And it's airfare, it's hotel, it's food, it's everything of taking the show on the road, if you will. And I think you're probably going to see a lot of those swings. But the baseball team does it quite often in the spring. And you see that across most of the Midwest and the North. The weather's just it's not good enough to play baseball outdoors. So a lot of times you'll see, basically a month-long road swing where they'll dip back home, periodically throughout, maybe do some long early weeks, because usually they have weekend series, but just trying to make the most out of that while they're out of their own, home region, if you will. So probably see a lot more of that. But at the end of the day too, it's just going to continue to rack up the cost for those guys when you're living on the road, for a good portion of your season, even if it's just a third or a quarter of it. And I imagine as the athletes become more empowered, curious to see if you don't start to see some pushback from it. I know you've already seen some kids come out on social media and say, hey, I'm going to reconsider some of the choices I made, because I picked this school because I wanted to stay close to home. I wanted my family to be able to see me travel when we play road games. And, you can throw all that out the window now.
Are the athletes getting too much power?
Well, they're
getting a lot. They're getting a lot of money, and they have the ability to come and go as they please. They have greater freedom than professional athletes.
Yes and no. I'll agree with you on some of that, but I'll disagree on quite a bit. They're not getting paid directly, first and foremost. They have to negotiate their own pay outside of what they're under contract, if you will, as far as their performance, their scholarships. Any money that's being had, however coordinated it is with the department through the NIL efforts, that's completely outside of the athletic department proper. So these guys aren't being paid for that, at least not directly. And I think that's very much the heart of the struggle right now is how much power should they have? What classification should they have? The athletes are always going to have virtually no say in any decisions on this level. But I think what you may start seeing is, kids reconsidering exactly what path they choose to take, because where some of the Power 5 schools, especially as you get into the Olympic sports, may have been the desirable location in the past. You look at Stanford. Stanford is year in, year out one of the top athletic departments in the country across the board. Extraordinarily well run, and extraordinarily competitive across the board. There were some Stanford athletes that have come out and said, I'm not so sure this is the best move for me at this point, if this is the direction we're going to go, because of those factors we cited earlier. And I don't think they're ever going to have the power to change that, but they certainly have the power to choose where they choose to enroll and who they choose to compete for. And there very well could be a movement on those fronts where kids maybe opt out of playing at that level, or at least in that league, simply because they don't want to be a part of this, bi-coastal I'm not getting paid for this yet. I'm in 4 different time zones over the span of 5 different days. All the while still trying to be a student and have a college life as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see. But, to the heart of your question, do they have too much power? I would say not, simply because you see active efforts all across the country at state and federal levels trying to further restrict what they're trying to achieve right now. And that's just the right to do what they want when they want. It's really disingenuous to say, that a kid should have to stay at a school for 3 years before they're allowed to transfer, when coaches and staffs and administrators and virtually every other student on campus is not constrained by those types of regulations. And now the conferences themselves are free to jump ship whenever they choose, simply by paying whatever the exit fee is and moving along. It doesn't seem very equitable when students are the ones being restricted and every other participant in that particular endeavor is effectively unregulated, but for, financial penalties.
Chronic Hoosier, can't thank you enough, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great one.
Take care, Jim.
Absolutely. Hey, up next, Mike Niziolek, the IU beat writer from the Bloomington Herald-Times, joined us. We're back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the... Hey, Mike.
How's it going?
How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'd be better if I could make it out to practice one day, but that has not worked out yet.
We got a few more opportunities here coming up, so.
You've got a nice setup there.
Thank you, sir.
You've been doing podcast or something?
Did, yeah, a little bit. But this is my office too, so I like to make it
mostly
nice.
Because most of my guests don't have the good setup like that. No, and where'd you come in from?
Last year I covered the Bengals for Cleveland.com, and then before that, we did colleges. Covered Virginia Tech for about 5 years for the Roanoke Times, and covered Auburn before that.
Awesome. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir.
I'll see you quite a bit. I'm here in Bloomington.
Okay.
I'm normally out there. It hasn't worked out. Although this year practices are a little later.
Okay.
They're going from like 9:30 to noon?
About, yeah.
How long? It's like segments 1 through 8 are open. How long does that actually last?
So it's about probably 10:30, 10:45-ish, about an hour.
Oh my God, I could do the show out there, the last hour of the show.
If you're going to do any of the show out there, wouldn't you just do all of it instead of trying to transport in the middle of doing the show?
Well, I would be there for all of it, yes, but they wouldn't be practicing for the first half hour.
Oh, I didn't understand what you were saying.
Yes, but I could do the entire show out there. But yes, the second half would be with football behind us, which would be awesome. And then you could just get people to walk over and say, hey, what's up? That would be pretty cool.
It would.
I'm going to do that. Tomorrow's open, right?
Tomorrow's just a Tom Allen press conference. Friday.
Damn it! I won't be here. So it's back to Monday, I think.
Yes.
Tomorrow's just Tom Allen.
Walt Bell as well.
All right, guys. 30 seconds.
Square in Bloomington near Cabello is locally owned and operated by Endeavor Hospitality Group. Launched from a previous staple in Bloomington, the former Function Brewing, Metalworks Brewing Company is the culmination of a passion for beer, food, and custom metal art. Check out their custom growlers. Metalworks Brewing Company has an updated menu, new brews, and will be offered in all Endeavor Hospitality restaurants. Come taste what Dr. Hops is brewing. Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Courtroom Sports Grill in Bedford. Now back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, high atop the 18th fairway on this Tuesday, August 8th. Jim Coyle with you as always. Joined now by new IU beat writer Michael Niziolek from the Herald Times. Michael, welcome. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Niziolek. Close enough.
Niziolek. Now, see, trust me, you've got nothing on Dustin DePirick.
Yeah, I could not guess that one.
Dustin, a longtime guest of ours. Dustin's been probably coming on for 3 years, but I guarantee you, maybe for the first entire year, I said Dustin Doperak. Nobody corrected me.
Yeah. Just Dustin is what I did. It's when I met him. So
yeah. Well, no one. What'd you say, Niziolek?
Niziolek, yes.
See, I've got to say Niziolek. Well, welcome aboard, Mr. Niziolek.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
3 times. Appreciate you joining us. Mike coming in just before this, he covered the Bengals in the NFL, covered Virginia Tech, he covered Auburn. Lots of fun football and basketball down at Auburn. Virginia Tech seen their better days. The Bengals, that had to be fun. They kind of returned to somewhat glory for them.
Yeah, doorstep of the Super Bowl last year again. Basically a couple plays away, had a chance. But yeah, they were 8-game win streak to end the regular season. They were as good of a team down the stretch as any in the NFL.
And so how long have you been up here now in Bloomington?
Just a couple weeks. Just started in I think second week of July was when I started.
Wow. We grabbed you hot off the trail, man.
That's right.
Well, welcome to Bloomington and welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. It's, man, the Big Ten. How's that been for you since you've been here 2 weeks? Since the conference has changed and just in that time immensely.
Yeah, well, at least I'm not covering the Pac-12, right? Then I'd be more.
Well, you kind of are now.
Yeah, I get part of it. But no, I mean, the pieces are going to keep falling here, I think, for a little while. I mean, obviously, you still got those 4 teams in the Pac-12 to sort of divvy up among, maybe the ACC apparently, or the Mountain West are talking about maybe a merger over there. So some pieces still to fall, but I mean, you kind of expected, I guess. As the Pac-12 was not revealing sort of their television deal, I think you got the sense that the ground over there was not very stable. So not a shock considering Oregon and Washington have been vetted by the Big Ten a year ago at this time, but certainly now just kind of a West Coast contingent in the Big Ten. It still sounds weird for sure.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it a little bit, but I'm not. I'm looking forward to going to LA to cover Indiana play in the Rose Bowl or Memorial Coliseum, just from a cool standpoint. But that'll be an ugly thing because there will be no one there from Indiana hardly. Indiana doesn't travel well in football,
right.
But on the basketball side, that'll be fun to go to Pauley Pavilion. And kind of merge those and to see UCLA come into Assembly Hall. Those are going to be some kind of fun things. And I've talked earlier today with Mike DeCourcy about, I think this is actually potentially a good thing for Indiana football, who is, for lack of a better word, the worst program in the history of Division I football. It's hard to say that because as bad as they've been, it doesn't seem like they've been that bad. They just have the least amount of wins, I think, or the most losses, whatever. But they have been under this sledgehammer of the Big Ten East for the last however 10 years or whatever. And it's just been, they actually was able to rise to prominence in the middle of that, but it was very short lasting.
Well, yeah, I think it dilutes their schedule in terms of the, spreading out sort of the Big Ten powers I mean, you're adding a USC and Oregon who are, traditionally in football, obviously very good. But I mean, you're not facing all these teams every year. I mean, if you're going to go to a schedule where you're trying to do a home and a road, I don't know what they'll do now with 18, but the original vision here was every 4 years you do home and away with each of these teams. So you're not playing a murderer's row of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State every year, and like this year where it's just kind of a brutal thing for a school that talent wise. I mean, same thing with a Rutgers or a Maryland. We're just not going to be able to match up with those teams every year. So it does, I think, spread that out. Indiana had to be happy with their schedule kind of coming up in 24 and 25. Now, obviously, that'll change a little bit. We'll kind of see what the fallout here is from adding these next teams. But yeah, no, in terms of the schedule, Tom Allen, I mean, I think said it at Big Ten Media Days that there's no love lost to losing some of those annual matchups with those teams, just because, it was hard for them to get a foothold and to overcome that, because there is a bit of a talent gap with a team like Ohio State that's recruiting at a different level than most teams in the country. There's only a few that could match that. Same with Michigan. So it's a good thing for Indiana football, absolutely. And there is some novelty, I think, to some of those matchups, and in basketball as well. I think you're going to, there's some fun there, I think, for the first couple of years to try to see those different settings and different stadiums, because you just weren't playing those teams at all frequently, for sure.
Unfortunately for Tom Allen, this is a year of great importance to him, I think, and his success. Unfortunately, he's going to have to play in the Big Ten East again this for one last year, and how the season goes and what Indiana does going forward is going to be there's the unknown right there. We don't know what this season is going to bring, because we're used to this, the quarterback battle and all that. Every year for the last 5 years, there has been an unknown quarterback, although there really has never been a battle to my mind. I've known who the starter was every year until this year. This year is actually a true quarterback battle. And I think there would probably be 3 in this fight if it hadn't have been for Dexter's injury. But I don't know who the starter is going to be for real. But I don't, not only that, how good are they going to be? That's the thing. I don't know what level either one of, whether it's Brendan Sorsby or Jackson. I don't know where their talent level is.
Yeah, they're a hard team to read just because, they've turned the roster over so much. Essentially like almost 35, 40 new players between the transfers and the freshmen. And you've got some transfers, that I think could swing some of these games that are, essentially 50-50 games, against a Louisville, against Purdue, against Maryland. The quarterback's obviously going to matter, but if you get a certain level of competency there, I think the rest of this comes into play. And I think the performance of guys like Andre Carter, Marcus Burris, EJ Williams, who I wrote about this morning, from Clemson, a guy that showed all the potential in the world as a true freshman and just never hit that ceiling. Can they resurrect his career? Those are the guys that are going to determine if they can get to that 6-win mark, get to that bowl game mark. Because I think that's what you're looking at. Look, beating Ohio State or Michigan's, I think is too tall of a task. But with all these transfers, if you hit on a group of them, 5, 7, you're talking about really making an impact on your roster. Because they did have some returning pieces. I think Bedford on the offensive line. Jalen Lucas obviously I think is all the talent in the world. If you can blend those guys with some of these transfers, then you're trying to get back to that 500 mark. But like you said, it's hard to say. And I think there's some interest in Indiana, in teams like Indiana, teams like Colorado, who are trying to reboot their roster in a year's time, because without the teams, I think, were trying to do that incrementally in the transfer portal. Now you're trying to say, look, if we're bad, why not go all in on it? And I think that's what Tom Allen did. And some positions are basically almost all new, like 6 defensive linemen they signed. So, that's kind of crazy. Michigan State did it a couple of years ago with much success, I think. Mel Tucker was one of the first to sort of really use that blueprint when he signed a class that featured Kenneth Walker, and Walker from Wake Forest hit it out of the park. And he turned that, they haven't been the same since, but they had that really successful season. So that's what Indiana's trying to do, hit lightning in a bottle with some of these kids.
And they've unfortunately had to do a lot of that. They've been more of a transfer portal recruiter than a recruit and build program. Unfortunately, we've seen the offensive line just be atrocious over the last few years, and Darren Hiller was relieved. There was improvement last year under Rod Carey, and now that's been moved on to Bostic, and hopefully they have some improvement there, because they had a good running room last year. They just couldn't protect anybody. But as far as the offense, I've never known less about Indiana football team than I do this particular team. The receivers, how good they are. The running backs, still real familiar with those. But the defense, how good this defense is going to be, or the defensive backfield. I have never had as many questions for an IU football team in the last of doing this show for the last 7 years as I do for this one.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, like I said, completely rebuilt defensive line essentially. The 2 deep will be almost completely different. The same thing with you mentioned the defensive backfield, corner. I mean, you're essentially replacing all four of your corners from last year on the 2 deep. So I mean, that's a situation where it's hard to say who's winning the position, because I mean they're scouting and kind of putting that together completely. Wide receiver, Camper coming back, from a torn ACL. You figure he's kind of leading, but the rest of that room, your jockeying position, DeCourcy Carter's another name I should have mentioned for transfers. An FCS guy, but had tremendous success at every level he's been at, now trying to make that leap. But like you said, not all these transfers are going to work out. So you probably want 5 to 7 starters out of that group to really flash. Can they do it? Is that too much to ask? I'm not sure. I mean, obviously the offensive line, you focused in on, and they get a really big addition. I think when you mentioned Bostad, the coach from Wisconsin, who's had tremendous success. Longtime assistant over there. He's a big piece. Can he get more out of that offensive line? Because that's kind of probably where it starts in terms of the offense. But it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together. Because like you said, the cliche is there's a competition battle at every position in fall camp. But for Indiana, it's really true, because they lost so much. They're bringing so many new pieces in. There's a lot of movement, I feel like, on that depth chart.
You're very familiar with your latest piece in the Herald Times is on EJ Williams, IU receiver who come from
Clemson.
Clemson, yeah. So you had some familiarity with him probably previously to arriving here at IU.
Yeah, I covered him when I was in Auburn. He was at Central Phoenix City, which is right there in Columbus, Georgia. So I was familiar with him even in high school. And he was a kid that I thought was really talented. It's just a smooth receiver. And I mean, he made that one-handed grab a couple years ago in the ACC championship game. It was the COVID season against Notre Dame. It's still weird.
So stop right there, people. Indiana has a receiver that played in the ACC championship game.
And he would stand out. He had a 33-yard touchdown too from Trevor Lawrence. And
in a 34-10 win over number 2 Notre Dame.
That's right. And so, he had a breakout year that year. And never really matched that. Had some injuries, kind of freak stuff like a thumb injury the next year. Had his knee scoped and ended up sitting out the spring. He talked honestly. Said he thought the coaching staff kind of lost trust, and he said it was kind of both ways. And so he's a kind of a piece that you look at and he's looking for playing time. Indiana can offer that. And can this be the step back to sort of stardom? Because he's a guy that, obviously has NFL aspirations, and I think he's the kind of the perfect guy where I think Indiana's season is going to come down to those guys, where if he has that sort of 700, 800-yard seasons, productive, those can go a long way to get you to 6 wins. Not toppling Michigan or anything, but I think the goal is you beat the likes of Louisville, Maryland, teams that I don't think these teams on paper are all that much better, or don't have Louisville's got a new coaching staff. Maryland has been tremendously inconsistent the last couple of years. So yeah, I think those are the teams you look to beat with guys like EJ Williams, because I think that he has all the talent in the world. He's just got to put it together.
1 minute.
Make sure you give Mike a follow on Twitter. It's easy to do, at Mike Niziolek, right? Or is it Michael?
Yes, Michael Niziolek, yes.
At Michael Niziolek. Niziolek. What's up next for you, Mike?
Well, we still got a couple weeks here at fall camp. So we're kind of going through the positions. We talked to Tom Allen on Wednesday and Walt Bell. Obviously, Walt Bell will be, I think, hopefully give us – they're not going to announce a quarterback, obviously, before the week 1 opener, but give us a little breakdown if they're narrowing down reps, how that battle's progressing, and I think some updates. Just I think there's a lot of focus, like you mentioned, offensive line. How are they incorporating? I think the goal is to get Jalen Lucas a lot more touches. How are they going to go about that? So that'll be interesting to kind of ask Walt about some of these kind of pressing questions, and especially that quarterback battle, which seems pretty even, like you said. I'm not sure how to handicap that race at this point. What's going to separate them? I'm not sure. I mean, obviously they're both young guys too, so that'll be interesting to hear from them on Wednesday.
Absolutely, Mike. I can't thank you enough, and look forward to hopefully seeing you frequently. We'd love to have you on as often as possible.
Absolutely, anytime. I enjoyed it. Nice meeting
Mike
you,
Jim. Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald Times, IU beat writer. Can't thank him enough. Also, big thanks to Mike DeCourcy today, of course. Joins us each week from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network, Chronic Hoosier as well. John, the producer, keeping us between the white lines. Most importantly, thanks to you guys. Without you, we have no reason to be here. We're back tomorrow to do it again. Coming up, not tomorrow, but soon, Scott Dolson and Kalen DeBoer, the head football coach at Washington, formerly offensive coordinator here at Indiana. Until tomorrow, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.